Please tell me and spell your full name.
My name is Arnon Adler. The first name is Arnon. The last name is Adler.
And do you have a nickname?
Arnie is my nickname.
What is your birth date and current age?
My birth date is September 14th, 1957, and my current age is 53.
Where were you born?
I was born in Petach Tikva, Israel.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one brother. His name is Judah.
And what is his birth date and where was he born?
He was born in Hadera, Israel, and his birthday is February 7th, 1950.
Please tell me your parents' names and their birth dates and where they were born.
Sure. My mother's name is Irene Adler. Her birthday is April 20th, 1926, and she was born, and forgive my pronunciation, in Revaranyos, Hungary. My father's name is Bernard Adler. He was born October 7th, 1920, and he was born in Nagybosh, Hungary.
Just briefly, if you can give me an outline of their experiences during the Holocaust.
Absolutely. They were both, as Hungarian Jews. My father was taken with a few members of his family from his village of Nagybosh to the ghetto of Matryoshka sometime around Passover 1944. Not long after the Germans occupied Hungary, and he was taken, he went, I believe, with his mother, his father, and one of his younger sister. Many of the other siblings had already either escaped or I believe most of them went to work camp, and he then was taken with all of them by train to Auschwitz, deported about a month after entering the ghetto. At Auschwitz, he was separated from his, his sister was killed on the train. He lost complete sight of his mother upon entering, getting removed from the train, and separated from his selected different ways by Dr. Mengele at Auschwitz. My father was sent to life. My grandfather was, executed. And he spent about a month in Auschwitz. From there, he was sent on a transport to the concentration camp Mauthausen in Austria. He was there a few weeks, and from Mauthausen, he was sent to a subcamp of Mauthausen called Ebensee, which also was in the Tyrolean Alps of Austria. That's where he spent the remainder of his imprisonment and was liberated from there by the United States Army.
From there, where did he go?
From there, he first went back to, after a few months, obviously he was very sick. He tried first to go back to Hungary and, see who was alive there. That's also where he met my mother at a train station. Upon realizing there was nothing there for him anymore, and I believe the Russian Red Army tried to draft him, or the Hungarian Red Army that was forming tried to draft him, and he didn't want any of that, so he kind of made his way with the help of Zionist organizations across Europe, I believe through Germany, having a number of experiences there. He wound up at some point in Antwerp, Belgium, where he received assistance from the illegal immigration into what was then Palestine. He was given a false identity as a member of the Jewish Brigade, a brigade of Jews from Palestine who were serving in the British Army. From there, he went by illegal boat into Palestine, where he was arrested by the British. Put in prison there in a town in Israel called Adler for a few months. From there, when he was released, he found his way to a kibbutz, kibbutz Givat Hayim. At that point, the war was starting to break out, the War of Independence, 1947, 1948. As part of the member of the kibbutz, he joined Haganah, the early Israeli Defense Force, fought against the British-led Jordanians, was injured at a Arab town called Tulkarm on the West Bank, what's now called the West Bank, and after he got better, he went back to Kibbutz Givat Hayim. He was there, well, at that point, at some point there, he married my mother.
Now, when did she get to Israel?
She came to Israel, I believe, a little later than him. I believe, and I've never gotten the complete story, but I believe Israel was already a state. And she came in what was called a religious Hakshara, or a religious Zionist group. And they had already been corresponding. They had actually met at a train station in Hungary. She was giving out sandwiches, bread with butter, for a Zionist organization. My father at first refused to accept the sandwich from her because she had hair. And none of the Jewish girls he knew had hair. They were all shaven, all the survivors from the concentration camp. So after she convinced him that she was a Jew, he agreed to take food from her. And she found him a place to stay because he was homeless. And, you know, from that point, they saw a little of each other and started to correspond. My father was not much to look at. He was 60, 70 pounds at most, and, you know, still quite ill.
She had not been deported then.
She
from
had
Hungary.
not been deported. I can go back when you want and tell her story a little.
Now, how did she manage to stay in Hungary and not be deported?
Through an amazing amount of courage and trust and maybe some naivety. She was 17 when the Germans occupied Hungary. And she had already been studying at a gymnasia, secondary school in Budapest. So she was out of that little village where people would be more easily identified as Jews. Nonetheless, when she was in Budapest, she never did make her way back to the village, by the way, so her parents and most of her siblings were killed. But she stayed in Budapest, where at first she put on the yellow star, you know, as was required of Jews, and was one day taken on what was commonly called a death march. You know, it was a march ostensibly to do some work or labor, but, you know, God knows where they were going. They were heading along a road. At one point, she looked at a Hungarian guard from the Hungarian fascists. They were called the Cross. And she looks at him, and she's already at the back of the line, and she says, she looks him right in the eye and says, "I have to tie my shoes. I have to tie my shoes." He looks at her, they look at each other, they make eye contact, and he says, "Okay," and he walks on, and the whole group walks on. She leans down to tie her shoe. As they keep walking, she then rolls into a ditch, makes her way back to Budapest somehow, you know, I've never heard the whole thing, on her own, and winds up getting assistance from a Zionist group there who gives her illegal papers. She gets the name Biro Marta, which is a Christian name, and she winds up, of all places, and she has a lot of other near misses and stuff, like so many people, you know, and there's times where she's hungry, she meets some other women who kind of help her and take her in, these other Jews who are also in hiding, but she winds up hiding in plain sight. She takes off her yellow star, she has these forged papers, and she goes to work in a hospital serving Hungarian and German soldiers who have been injured in the war. You know, survives a lot of near misses there. Sometimes somebody would say, "You're a Jew, aren't you?" And either she would deny it or acknowledge it based on her trust of the person who was asking. Often, you know, just on eye contact. And she spent the remainder of the war there, was liberated by the Russians. That was a crazy time too. The Russians, you know, they had a, you know, like an elite force, but the there was also a rabble that would come in behind, and there was looting and raping. Somehow she was very fortunate and found some Russian Jewish soldiers who, as a 17, 18-year-old, protected her, looked after her. She rode the trains with them back to Hungary, and that's where she got, where she met my dad again.
Now, when she went to Israel, do you know if it was her intention going to marry your father?
It's funny because I always thought it was their intention, but there's been times where she told me that this one or that one on kibbutz really liked her, and she wasn't sure which one to marry. So even though they were corresponding, and my father was, I love you, I love you, I love you, she was still not so sure.
So, but they did marry, and
They did
two
marry.
children were born.
2 children.
How old were you when they came to the United States?
I was a year old.
So you don't remember much about Israel at all?
No, nothing from that time.